For most of the 20th century, if you wanted to know whether a car was worth buying, your options were pretty limited. You'd read a magazine, watch a TV review, or just trust whatever the dealership told you. That was it. A small group controlled the information, and manufacturers knew exactly how to work that system. Reviews were managed, press cars were carefully placed, and everything followed a structure that kept things predictable. In the UK especially, TV shows defined that space. Top Gear started as a simple motoring program and later turned into a global hit, making cars part of mainstream entertainment. Around the same time, Fifth Gear offered a more traditional, review-focused approach. Between them, they shaped how people saw cars for years. But even then, things were starting to shift. Print was losing attention as audiences moved online, and the same was happening with car media. People still cared about cars, they just didn't want to wait for a magazine issue or a scheduled show to hear about them. Then YouTube came along, and at first, it didn't look like a threat at all. Early car videos were rough, low quality, and made by people with no access or budget, just regular owners talking honestly about their cars. But that's exactly what people connected with: the honesty, the lack of polish, the things you wouldn't hear in a traditional review. And slowly, people stopped just watching, they started trusting it. What followed was a shift that most people didn't even notice happening. Car YouTubers didn't just change how cars are talked about, they changed how they're launched, how criticism is handled, and how buyers make decisions. And it didn't happen all at once. It happened gradually, one video at a time, until the industry realized it wasn't fully in control of the story anymore. And that's what we're going to explore in this video. So how did it actually get to that point? When Google bought YouTube in 2006 for $1.65 billion,
today Google bought YouTube for $1.65 billion.
The platform wasn't even 2 years old, but it was already growing fast enough that you couldn't really dismiss it. Over time, it became one of the most visited places on the internet, with over 1 billion hours of video watched every single day. At that scale, the idea of who gets to be a media outlet starts to mean a lot less. Anyone with a camera suddenly has access to the same audience that traditional outlets spent decades building. Early car content was rough, kind that would never have made a magazine editor nervous. But people weren't just watching, they were commenting, arguing, correcting each other, sharing their own experiences. That back and forth pushed creators toward the stuff that actually mattered to real owners. Running costs, long-term reliability, the details that never show up in a brochure. Out of that, a few formats took shape. Some creators focused on practical reviews that felt less like a test drive and more like a friend telling you whether a car is actually worth your money.
The first problem came a mere 2 months after I bought the car, when my dealer discovered that the suspension lower control arms were worn and the radiator was leaking.
Others made car content entertaining enough that people who didn't even care about cars were watching, Donut Media being the obvious example. Then there were channels working more like a digital newsroom, faster and more reactive than anything print ever managed.
It's the tire smoking, drag strip ripping, unofficial top muscle car of the 80s. It's got a reputation.
And then there's the rebuild genre, which is where things got genuinely uncomfortable for the industry. These videos pulled back the curtain on everything that normally stays behind workshop doors. Real costs, unexpected problems, full teardowns, filmed as they happened. Matt Armstrong turned that into a storytelling format where the audience follows every setback until the payoff, and it connected with people in a way that more polished content never quite managed. A rebuild doesn't just review a car, it turns the car into a running public story. Now, the more people watch these YouTubers, the harder it became for the industry to pretend these videos were just background noise. Once buyers were forming opinions before a car even officially launched based on leaks, early reactions, and creator content, the old playbook of running ads and managing the narrative through a handful of trusted outlets suddenly felt incomplete. Brands still did all of that, but now they also had to figure out how to win in a space they didn't control. One of the most visible changes was what happened to the car launch. It stopped being just an event and started being a campaign built around cameras and online coverage. That shift accelerated during COVID, when in-person gatherings became impossible and manufacturers had no choice but to go fully digital. But even after that, the approach stuck because the audience had moved and the industry followed. Launches are now designed with online viewers in mind first, not showroom floors. Embargo culture became part of that too. Manufacturers had always used embargoes to control when reviews could go live, creating a coordinated burst of coverage at launch.
Now tonight, Ford officially revealed the built wild Bronco lineup.
Traditional outlets had lived inside that system for years, and creators ended up inside it too. Because if you want early access and to be part of the conversation at launch, you play by the same rules. But the bigger shift was about the fact that brands could no longer just send a message and have it land cleanly. The audience responds immediately, and creators amplify whatever the audience actually cares about, which is not always what the brand wanted people to focus on. Matt Armstrong's Bugatti project is probably the clearest example of that. What started as a rebuild video series ended up becoming a public debate about independent repair and whether owners even have the right to fix ultra-rare cars outside official channels. People who had never thought about buying a Bugatti were suddenly watching and forming opinions because the story had grown into something bigger than the car itself. Creators didn't just become another marketing channel, they became a parallel reputation system that runs whether brands participate or not. If a car is genuinely good, that gets amplified. If it disappoints, that gets amplified too. And there is very little a manufacturer can do to stop it once the audience has made up its mind. And that reputation system has quietly pushed manufacturers to think differently about how cars are presented. Not necessarily designing cars only for the camera, but definitely considering how they'll appear on screen and online. In the past, a car was mainly designed for the showroom or for performance testing. Today, visibility matters in a new way. You can see it in features that are visually distinctive and easy to demonstrate. Things like the GMC Hummer's crab walk or similar off-road show modes stand out because they look unusual and are easy to capture on video. These features do have real engineering behind them, but they also translate extremely well into short clips, thumbnails, and viral moments. That overlap between function and visual appeal has become more noticeable as online platforms influence how cars are discovered. It goes beyond individual features. Design choices today often consider how a car will look in photos and video. Strong colors, sharp lighting elements, large screens, and clean interiors all tend to present better on camera. With more reviews happening on YouTube and social media, that visual clarity has become more important than before. What this creates is a feedback loop. Cars that look interesting on camera get more coverage. More coverage increases visibility and demand, and that visibility starts influencing what gets attention in the market. It doesn't replace traditional engineering priorities, but it adds another layer to them. So while cars aren't built only for virality, it's clear that how a car performs on screen is now part of the equation in a way it wasn't 20 years ago. That's where things get complicated. For buyers, car creators have been a big win. People can now see what a car is really like to own, what breaks, what it costs, and what to expect, long before visiting a dealership. Information that once lived in forums is now easy to find and understand. They've also made the industry more transparent. Audiences now understand embargoes, press cars, and sponsorships, making it harder for brands to hide problems when they're exposed online. But attention has become a currency, and that creates issues. Hype is a major one. Constant exposure to rare cars has turned them into status assets, pushing prices up and fueling speculation. Even the wider car market felt it after COVID, with rising prices pushing everyday buyers further out. Then there's trust. The line between honest reviews and paid promotions isn't always clear, which slowly erodes credibility. Globally, it's even messier, with concerns about transparency and influencer-driven marketing. So while car YouTube improved things, it also created new problems, and no one has fully solved them yet. Because car creators are not new media anymore. They are genuinely part of how the auto industry operates, sitting somewhere between journalism, entertainment, and marketing. And that position is only going to get more complicated as the space matures. The economics are already shifting. In 2024, there was a wave of prominent creators leaving established channels, frustrated by media companies that had bought into the space and started prioritizing output and metrics over the kind of content that built the audience in the first place. Car YouTube is going through the same growing pains that happen to every independent space when money moves in and starts optimizing things. What that all adds up to is that this is not really a YouTube story anymore. It is a much broader shift in how car information moves, how reputations get built, and how buyers make decisions. The industry will keep working with creators because that is where the audience is. The audience will keep following creators because cars are expensive, and people want an honest opinion before spending that kind of money. And once people discovered they could get the real story of a car through someone they actually trusted, the manufacturers lost the ability to be the only voice in the room. That is not something that gets undone. Tuna No Crust, signing off.